As we're settling in here, I was gonna say there's cushions, but they're gone.
There are some in the library.
Okay, some in the
They're
library.
less squishy, they're the hard ones, but Paige and Jimmy are bringing out more chairs, so I'm seeing like 3 or 4 empty now.
Okay. Are those ones occupied there? Looks like it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. Yeah, it is such a good time for the Dharma. And such a good time to be together with the Dharma. And such a good time to continue to strengthen our practice. You know, it's needed in every part of our life. But let's just do like a little poll in the room. Are you having a hard time hearing? Do you have AirPods in though? Oh, oh yeah, they work as hearing aids. That's so cool. My colleague worked on that. That's wonderful. Also, would you like a seat closer? Would that help? Okay. Oh, this one is free? You're okay? Okay. So I was going to do a little kind of checking in of the collective nervous system here. So for who right now does the climate of this world, to say nothing of the actual climate, for who does that feel like a place of a bit of tumult and distress and worry? Just a bit. And how about inner world, personal life, relationship with others? Yeah, this is, I think it's, always true at certain levels, of course, because the nature of being a human on this planet means there is always ongoing loss and change and shifts. But I think there's something quite exacerbated when we all feel so frayed, when we feel that collective anxiety. Even what could be a smaller interpersonal difficulty or loss is heightened. And then a bigger interpersonal difficulty or loss, even more so. And what I hope we can do together tonight is meet that with clarity, presence, and love, and also resolve and determination. I have to say, it seems very clear to me that things aren't going to get better soon. So we really actually need to become true warriors of compassion, right? And that's what this entire 8th century text is about. And that's not to become rigid and detached at all. It's actually this unbelievable potential to have our heart open even wider because we are so rooted. I was chatting with a friend on the path this morning about this kind of quintessential teaching in Buddhist practices, and I'm sure in other wisdom traditions, this idea that when you have very firm, stable roots, it can feel very easeful and relaxed on the top. And so here I like to think that we're going to deepen our roots so that we can kind of have that pliancy, because the world's going to keep pushing us around. I mean, it has in the past, right? Yeah, likely to in the future. And yet, this promise, which is always here with the teachings, is we don't have to do it alone. In fact, we're never alone. If we think we are, it's a total illusion. And that there is a way to have a reduction of the added suffering on the inevitable pains of what's happening in our personal lives and in the world together. Last week, we touched on this term, Shepa, and I want to come back to that term. And we did this practice together that helps us kind of, develop and strengthen our attention through labeling thoughts. And I want us to revisit that again. It deserves ongoing practice and strength. And if you are here tonight and weren't here last week, no problem at all. It can be very fresh. But I want to give a little explanation about this practice and why I think it's helpful for us. And this term Shenpa, which is a Tibetan term, And it describes not just the emotion, like anxiety, despair, what am I missing? Rage. Any others going on for folks right now? Panic, yeah, and loss, right? It's not just those feelings. It's this way that we habitually respond. It's kind of the way we get stuck. So when we're looking at and meeting the Shepa, we're looking at and meeting not just the simple natural experience of thoughts arising, feelings arising, emotions arising. It's that way we contract. We make them feel much more real. And what's so interesting about this simple practice of labeling, in which it's very simple, anyone can do it. Of course, we'll get distracted, but just identifying, thinking, thoughts. You can get a little more advanced, thinking about the future. As someone mentioned last week, images, memories. You don't want to get too fancy, because then you will get carried away in your labeling, right? So that's not the point. The point isn't becoming an expert annotator of your inner experience. It's actually in that labeling, in that moment, you recognize the emptiness of thought. No longer is it the story of, oh my God, I'm really worried that I, won't find a new job. And I really need a new job right now. And I don't know, this economy, everything's looking bad. That's a thought. When we let it be the entire story, it can totally, merge with our entire capacity of perception and thought and experience. So labeling it, we can think of it as this gentle but firm kind of, you're not real. This is just a thought. This isn't happening in this moment. And there's so much power in that, practicing it in meditation, and then, of course, hopefully extending it into our life. And so that kind of really seeing clearly the emptiness of thought is the purpose of labeling. It can get, again, a bit, we can get in this almost competition with ourselves of finding these more and more creative ways to label what's happening. But what we really want in the body, in the mind, in the heart is this kind of easeful relaxation, because we have that deep sense of groundedness in our practice. And so as these thoughts arise, we just label them and we return to that deep sense of groundedness. So we'll anchor in the breath, and then as the thoughts arise, label them, come back to the breath. And some people feel like this practice is cheating, and I get it, because you have something to do in meditation, which is like way better than just focusing on the breath, which is so hard, right? We have to come back over and over and over and over. And another way you could see it, as cheating is kind of just a suppressing. Like, oh, I'm just using this to avoid difficult experiences, to just name them and move away from them. And that's why, the intention or the perspective of, I am seeing clearly the illusory nature of thought. I know that sounds fancy, and if it doesn't have a resonance with you, no problem. But I'm seeing clearly that these thoughts, just like a rainbow, have a beautiful, maybe alluring at times, experience or kind of visual or felt experience to them. But just like if you moved towards a rainbow, you would see there's nothing there. It's just all the causes and conditions of light and moisture creating an illusion. And the thought is, just how creative our mind is in coming up with new material. I think it's interesting. I haven't heard anything I felt to be entirely satisfying as to why we constantly think. But just in case you were under any other illusion, all of us do that. It's really like an open faucet. Like thoughts just come and they keep coming and they keep coming. And you'll hear really, advanced, attained beings who've been meditating, decades, maybe lifetimes, if that's in your worldview. They still think during practice. There's no Shepa. There's no hooking on. So there's a difference between having a thought arise and then, falling in love with the thought merging with the thought, it taking over, carrying you away, you elope with the thought, right? And then having a thought arise and like, oh my gosh, this is a terrible analogy, swiping left, right? Is it right? Is it left? I don't know. Out of the way, right? Like, no, thank you. I see you. You look great. Nope, I'm good. So that idea of being able to notice it as not you, not get carried away in it, and just, and I really like thinking of it as like a Jedi, like, like lightsaber through it. But I mentioned something last week and Tom picked up on it, so I want to say it before practice, which is you can also imagine it as, that thought that arises, that thought, that memory, that image, it is and carries the energy of awareness. It's not as though a thought just comes out of nowhere, it comes out of our awareness, so that when we see it, we can also harness it back into our awareness. Like the thought, here you are so tired, end of the day, but you're still going to be thinking when you close your eyes, right? I mean, maybe if you fall asleep, you're off the hook, but we close our eyes and there's so many thoughts. Even if we're tired, even if we're like, I can't focus, we can still think. So can we harness that energy of thought and bring it right back here? And so kind of feeling that sense of, ooh, that thought was kind of getting carried away, or I was getting carried away with a thought, and now it's like mine again. That energy is mine. I'm like reclaiming it. So this is the approach I want us to have in labeling. It's really important that our intention and our approach, it has this clear seeing, right? Illusory nature of thought, not running away with you, and also this kindness, like, oh, this is energy I can use, almost like an appreciation for it. So that's the attitude I want to bring with it. There's one more thing I wanted to say on Shepa and labeling. Well, hopefully it'll come to me. And in the practice, doing this, maybe needless to say, but worthwhile to say, it helps us develop our attention. And that is just this, unbelievable resource that we need for every single part of our life. Everything that is required of us requires our focused attention. And I don't need to tell you that there is a war for our attention, right? And it's harder and harder for many of us to not succumb to the pull of constant checking, constant vigilance. And so this practice allows us to notice the kind of spark before the flame, or the impulse before we move into, and just unbelievable practice. And I remember what I was going to say, which is what's neat to notice, and some of you mentioned this last week after our practice, is that there's different kinds of thoughts that come up. They have a different weight and a different texture and a different allure to us. Some of the most kind of compelling, juicy thoughts are actually of really bad things, right? But we're like, ooh, I gotta think about that. That's really important. If I don't think about that, everything's gonna go wrong, And then sometimes they're juicy and nice because it's like, wow, that was such a beautiful evening I had with my friend last night. I just felt so held and loved. Maybe that is the kind of juicy thought, right? And then there's these lightweight thoughts for some of us of what's for dinner after? But that might also be kind of compelling. It's like, well, there's Guadalajara, but there's Cancun. Oh, but they close at 9, but the pizza shop's open, right? It's like we can really proliferate with our thoughts, even these kind of wimpy ones, these less exciting ones. So to, help us in that, sense of real curiosity about just this unbelievable array, this whole, fountain that is open, pouring of our thoughts, but without getting lost in them, but really not making them a problem, using them as the very energy for our practice. How's that sound? Yes.
You say that's cheating because it's repressing the thoughts, but how is just letting them drop and dissolve by their own without pushing? How is that repressing? We're just not feeding them and then they dissolve, right?
Yes.
Is that repressing? I don't think it is.
No, some people think it's repressing. I don't think it is.
Right, but you said initially that it's cheating because it's repressing.
I said some people think it's cheating. Yeah, and I think the reason they think it's cheating is because there's something to do, right? Instead of, the pure hardcore just following the breath, giving yourself a cognitive task. And yeah, again, I really trust each of your all wisdom in the room to discern if this practice is great for you, or if breathing is better, or compassion is better, and we'll try all forms here. From the research point of view, doing focused attention, open monitoring, they all have enormous benefits, for strengthening neural networks, for attention. So it's not like, there's some differential benefits, but by and large, whether we're using a little thinking or we're focusing on just sensation, the benefits are there. So still get that. Any other questions before we start? All right. So let's give ourselves a moment. And I did notice, I think there's some new faces in the room, so very much welcome. And sometimes when you're new in the room, it can just be helpful to take a moment and orient to the space and recognize that we have someone at the door, Mace, who will make sure that we are okay to practice here. And if you haven't been in this space, like last week, do you guys remember? It was bumping. There was like music and Harleys, and I saw there was actually like some art opening up the street. And it was also nice weather. Tonight, everyone's like, it's winter again. But just to be aware, there can be a lot of sounds right outside this space, and just, recognize the illusory nature of sound passing. And for friends at home, get cozy in your space. And let's really give ourselves a moment to settle into the body, especially the posture of practice. It's so sweet when we can make the very posture of practice feel like a sacred posture. So inviting this sense of the body as this vessel or temple. And finding a posture that almost feels like that regal nobility. Feeling just the intrinsic dignity of our upright spine. And then softening through the face and the chest and the belly. Maybe thinking of if you've ever seen a statue of the Buddha or Tara. They have that lovely upright spine, and yet their face appears so at ease. So finding that quality of rest and relaxation around the eyes, between the eyebrows. And a softness through the jaw. And begin by noticing anything pleasant that can be noticed in the body as a way to feel the welcoming of attention and awareness to the body. Taking a moment for us to orient to the space and the place that's right here. So feeling, sensing, and imagining just our space in this room, whether here in the center or at home. Feeling and sensing the space just outside of us, the still light sky that's turning towards night. Feeling and sensing the atmosphere holding us here today in San Francisco with wind and fog. And again, bringing attention and awareness more to the body itself. And taking a couple moments with this real kind and caring attention to notice what's present in the body, almost as though you were greeting the body, really being present with what's here in this moment throughout all the different areas of the body, all the territories and sensations. And seeing if you can sense the quality of stillness in the body. The body is not moving anywhere, headed anywhere. And it has this quality and capacity to just feel solid, stable, and still, like the mountain. And of course, there's thoughts, memories, and images already arising. For a couple moments, let's settle the speech and the mind in their natural states by following the breath. Noticing the sensations of breath so subtly traveling in and out of the nostrils. Noticing how the breath is just slightly cooler as it travels in through the nostrils, and maybe even being able to sense the warmth of the breath as it travels out through the nostrils. If this is hard to feel, simply imagining the quality of breath traveling in and out. If the nostrils feels too subtle, you can experiment with noticing the breath at the abdomen, noticing the belly rise, then gently fall. And seeing if you can sustain the same level of curious and close attention with the inhale as with the exhale. We often kind of space out on the exhale or get carried away. So see if you can sustain breath by breath that continuity of attention. The entire inhale, the entire exhale. And whether you're noticing the breath at the nostrils or the belly, can this noticing be direct? Not imagining or considering the breath, but really feeling the breath. And with that feeling of the breath, there is a knowing of the breath. This could feel quite pleasant. It's balancing our mind, our body, our heart, giving a safe refuge for the mind to be in one place, fully entering this experience of knowing the breath. And this is our anchor. This is our foundation. How we find our base, our roots, coming back to the breath again and again and again. Now we add in this extra layer. When a thought arises, simply labeling it thought, thinking, possibly memory, image, imagining. And then we return refreshed back to the breath again. We do this over and over, whether the thought captures us for just a breath or two, or whether we're carried away for minutes. We can always keep returning, really refining that sense of refreshment as we return to the breath. Keep coming back, keep coming back. And as you label the thought, seeing the energy that we bring to that labeling. Can it be that wise, compassionate seeing? This thought is just a thought. It's not me in the present moment. And feeling a gentleness and care for seeing directly through. And finding ourselves back home in this body, the only place where we are truly ever in the present moment. Breath by breath. Consider the possibility that you really can't do this wrong. There's just different lengths of time in which we have the opportunity to return. Carried away for a while, a different kind of return than just carried away for the moment. And then very gently bringing the quality of attention to the forefront as a quality of compassion and care. We've had a front row seat to the contents of our mind, and we are aware of some of the struggles and difficulties cycling through. And so just turning directly towards this momentary, moment-to-moment experience of challenge or difficulty, and finding a sense of great, simple care. And so releasing the labeling, and instead, as we are breathing in, just breathing in with a sense of care and compassion for this human mind and heart. And as we're breathing out, imagine extending that care to all the beings in this room who also have a human mind and heart, in which there are challenges and difficulties, thoughts that are hard, sticky. Breathing in, may I feel ease and peace with my thoughts. Breathing out, may all beings feel ease and peace amid their thoughts. Breathing in, may I find a happy and calm mind. Breathing out, may all beings find happiness and a calm mind. Breathing in, may I feel freer from the mind of hope and fear, clinging and aversion. Breathing out, may all beings be freer from their minds of hope and fear, clinging and aversion. Releasing the phrases and words, and just allowing a sense of gentleness and care in the body. From this mind of gentleness and care, everything that arises, sounds, thoughts, experiences, are all held in that gentleness and care. Thank you for your practice. Wasn't that cool? We had that really annoying sound as we're practicing compassion. Friends online, we had this like very loud backing up car sound. It's like, oh yeah, that's that core feeling of contraction that needs my compassion. So again, maybe many of you have been here before, but just to introduce this space, the San Francisco Dharma Collective, an entirely volunteer-run center. Very special to have our sit here supported by the generosity of so many beings, many of whom are in this room. And every evening that we get to come together, we constellate a new community. And what's really essential in the teachings from the very beginning is not just having a teacher, not just the teachings themselves or the practice, but it is the Sangha and community. And we see very much the need for Sangha and community in our daily lives. And this one, while there are folks who are regular or coming back, it's never quite the same. So we get to practice a new Sangha every Wednesday night here. And to do so in a way that feels respectful and supportive, we have to kind of come together and unifying agreements around how we share, how we connect. And the most pith way to describe that is we treat the practice of listening and sharing with one another as a practice of great compassion. And a practice of great compassion is one in which we really withhold as much as possible our sense of we already know, judgment, fixation. So when we think someone is speaking and we're thinking, yeah, what are they talking about? They don't know anything, or that happened to me too. Like really stopping that habitual way of thinking and responding and letting it feel fresh, and also kind of like that field of compassion and care that we were generating, receiving in that way. And that allows us to, create the space for folks here to share in a more free way. And it is a great generosity often to share your experience here. Sometimes you think your question is unusual or strange, but I assure you that many other people in the room probably have that same question. And then there's something that I really admire with the Sangha, which is sharing meditative experiences. What happens, what is experienced, it just brings so much richness to this room and just can be quite beautiful. Some of the things that we can look out for is, sharing too much than what we can hold in this space together in the context of this night, and sharing in a way that might, inadvertently kind of be too much for others to hold with us. So that's my invitation for you all. And I would love to, before we get into the text for tonight, hear any reflections or questions about that practice. For some of you doing that the second time now, but with a different kind of instruction. For some of you, maybe this is a newer practice. And for folks in the room, we use this microphone so that we can hear each other, or so that our friends online can hear us. And for folks online, just raising a hand. So, yeah, yes, please. Would you mind? And saying your name too would be great. And turning it on.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I've been struggling with regret. And one of the things I've been trying to do in meditation is somatically figure out what emotions are feeling in my body. And regret seems to me very much like a rumination. Like it just feels like very much actually thought, which actually I really loved the practice today. And then if I'm being really honest, it feels like I'm avoiding the grief and the sadness, being stuck in the regret. So just wanted to ask you for some advice about regret, and if you have a somatic experience with regret. I know it's subjective, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Beautiful question. Thank you, Miriam. And what an uncomfortable place. I wouldn't maybe necessarily put that back so quick, 'cause maybe, maybe you want to say something, just depending. Yeah, regret, and I might not have this right for you, but regret and doubt can go closely together, right? So it is this, kind of classic stage of bargaining, right? Where we're like, I don't want this thing. I want it to not be this way. And there's the regret and then the doubt, like, what if I could have, or I should have, or they could have, or I would have. There's just this way of, you're exactly right, like not landing in the uncertainty or the loss or, what is there. I was joking today. I'm almost superstitious to say this out loud, but I'm like working on a book proposal. It's exciting. I've already worked on one and it didn't go anywhere, so that's why I'm like, well, no, we'll see. But I was describing sadness as like the basement emotion. Like it's underneath there. I was like, but you know what? Like once you really there's such a natural desire to avoid and not be there. But so often what sadness opens us up to is the universal shared experience of sadness. So it's like going to the basement and realizing the party's in the basement. Like we're all here. Like we're all here, And so no forcing, is what I'd say. And I have like a couple playlists that I can like really rely on to make me like cry. So it doesn't always need to be in meditation, right? That we can invite a touching and a titration, like make sure you have your other like get pumped playlist right next to it if you feel you need it. But there is, and it's beautiful that you're being called to meet it somatically, there is often, this kind of stuck resistance, and whether that's, subtle body or something more like gross physical body, like pushing, sadness really has the capacity to kind of clear the blockages in the body when we let it flow naturally. And, it's funny, even folks who enjoy sadness, like I consider myself a pretty big fan of sadness. I like it. Fear, God, I'm done. I wish we would never meet again, but we meet all the time. But sadness, even though I like it, there can be an avoidance of it. Like there's just kind of this not wanting to be with it. So I would say to not force it. And then that ruminative doubt, regret spiral in practice is really tricky. And it's tricky to do labeling with because it's like, it's so sticky that sometimes it's actually very supportive to like have a journal and write out that weirdness and then come back to practice. Just so you're not, because it can be really tricky to loosen it by focusing on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for saying that. Yeah. The one thing I've tried to negotiate with it is amazingly enough, it's like the state that I'm feeling the regret in is not the state in which I was when I made that decision.
Yeah.
And that self had every right
Yeah.
to make that decision. And if
Yeah.
I put myself in that self,
Yeah.
in some ways it feels like it's like these other parts are just trying to take her over.
That's
And
the doubt,
And
right?
it's like, well, why can't she just be, but they don't
Ooh,
believe that.
yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, well, that line, why couldn't you just, that's our like so-called optional suffering. It doesn't necessarily feel that way, right? But that's the place where we just bring like all that love, you know, no negotiating, no talking like, but I deserved it or they didn't deserve like, just like love, 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 you know, because it's like you said, these parts or these pieces, you know, often are very early or young, and the whole rational piece is it's not going to work very well. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Question, reflection, comment? How was the practice for you? Yes, please.
I loved your preamble today,
Oh, thanks.
and in particular, the line about, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, there might be an experience, it's only a part of us, it's not all of us, and not to fixate on that. And to therefore, when we went into the meditation, practicing labeling. So I found when I went into the meditation, there were a couple of fixations that I had. One was around myself, and another was of another. And when then I reminded myself that this isn't all of me, then I was able to practice more self-forgiveness or self-compassion. Just relax, like,
Yes, beautiful.
and then allow that to go. And similarly then practicing compassion for the other person. This wasn't just all her. She was a lot more than this.
Yeah.
And that also felt lightening. And then when the noise happened outside, I kind of initially was a little, perturbed, even somatically. Then I kind of reimagined, if they're making some noises, they must be stuck in some way. And so extending greater compassion and
Wow.
that, there's noise out there, but I felt like a lot of energy in the room that was in addition to the full experience. So it wasn't just that. So I just felt better overall. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I love that. And I love how you said self-forgiveness, self-compassion, relaxation, right? Like, it's like the whole like feel or field of that experience, which is, again, it's so too simplistic to say. I've said this a couple times, but really like contraction and openness. Like we can really narrow it. Am I contracted right now or am I open? And just, can we open, and, that relaxation is such a reward. And I very much bow to your compassion for the guys out there. I was like, don't they know what we're doing in here? I caught myself, but I was like, come on, guys. So thank you so much. And it's lie, right? Why? Okay. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Question, comment? Yes, Vanessa.
Vanessa, it's been a minute, maybe a long minute since I've been here, but it was nice to come back with like the labeling actually felt like a superpower. Maybe this is cheating, that's fine, but I noticed just coming back to the breath so much faster with it. Like it was just all of the dilly-dallying was just sort of, the time was cut down. And then that led to thoughts of like, I'm winning at meditation and I haven't been on the cushion in quite some time. And then that would dissipate more quickly, like with the labels, which was beautiful. And then the noise was kind of like a good greatest hits. I think I've sat with you a lot doing like sound meditation and doing all of the senses, and especially in the old space, it would happen all the time. And so it was just like, oh yeah, I remember we've worked with this before, people screaming, yelling, music, terrible music. So it just felt like a very nice, like coming home moment. Like, there's some tools I have for this.
Yeah. You are killing it. Yeah. And so nice to just, have that home and familiarity. And, for any of us here, sometimes we do stray from our practice in the Dharma, right? And then we can come home, and it's beautiful. And to do so without a kind of criticism or recrimination or any of that, and just that we can, it's not a linear path. There is no grades given out, right? And we can just feel, especially it's so sweet to have enough of that kind of muscle memory of practice that when we really need it, it's there for us too. So welcome home. Okay, any other reflections, questions, thoughts? Beautiful to hear from folks. Yeah.
Real quick on the idea of cheating. Yeah, you laughed.
No, I'm not being sorry, I'm just.
Car alarm.
I'm closer to all this.
The idea of noting practice being cheating with, it's funny when you talked about coming from that, just the breath. Because when I first came to noting practice, I had come out of the Zen tradition, and it was just the breath, sitting and wall gazing and just the breath. And when I was first introduced to the noting practice, I had this insight almost immediately that this thinking is going on all the time anyway. It's always going on, and the noting practice has always made it much easier for me to not get snared and drugged down the street with the thought.
Yeah.
That it comes up, I note it, and it goes. It comes up, and I note it, and it goes. So for me, the idea of it being cheating is, no, it's not cheating. It's actually paying attention to my thoughts rather than just getting lost in them.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Jimmy. So we're going to keep going here with this beautiful text. And again, for folks who haven't maybe been coming, we, for the third time in the last 10 years, I guess, are doing, because keep needing it, No Time to Lose, which is this 8th century text of the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. And we're on the chapter right now that continues to emphasize the value and importance of patience. So the chapter before this really explicitly focused on how to use patience to meet and work with anger. And in this chapter, there's been a lot of emphasis on patience as this kind of developing the skill or tool of distress tolerance, of being with what's uncomfortable to be with. And that it's this kind of detoxing of our habitual pattern of reacting, right? And so that, again, patience, not always, the hottest topic that people are running out into the streets in order to learn more about. And yet this development of patience, which, labeling our thoughts is developing patience. All attention practices are developing patience. The kind of grand practice of developing patience is equanimity. So seeing the huge, big, zoomed out picture and being able to kind of hold the joys and the sorrows of this world with equal measure. It's the greatest of patience, the kind of big view of patience. And in this chapter, let's see here, I want to start with a little bit of the, as some of you know, Shanti Deva, again, 8th century monk who apparently was not very so-called good at his monkly duties. So he was a prince, and on the night before he was going to become a king, he fled his kingdom because he realized it would be a lot of responsibility, and he got like a little overwhelmed and went to the monastic life. Beautiful with Nalanda, which was kind of one of the highest monasteries in the land at the time. to do study, but apparently he didn't do his chores and he barely practiced. And some of his fellow monks thought it would be a good way to get him straight by telling him that he would lead the teaching that week. And they figured he'd be so embarrassed that he'd really start to apply himself. But instead, he gave this like unbelievable teaching, the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, that is still highly used among the Dalai Lama and many other great teachers today, and then apparently dissolved into thin air. So that's the context. Oh man, I would love to finish this book and dissolve into thin air. That would be so good. Can't promise it. But Shanti Deva, like, you know, for his time is like funny. It's not, you can like argue if it's that funny. And also like quite dramatic. Like uses these really intense metaphors about our mind and suffering, and not because he really believes in this like, you know, intensity per se of this is what's happening, but because he wants to kind of invite us to look with like poignancy at the hell we make in our own lives, you know, through having these uncontrolled thoughts and emotions. That's his main goal and purpose. And this is one of his great drama moments here. There are many. And then the secondary text by the beloved Pema Chödrön. Seriously, if you don't have like one of her books downloaded just for easy access, I highly recommend it. Just pick up anywhere. Just listen, 10 minutes, no problem. So she gives commentary that's really supportive here too. So this stanza, it's his stanzas, then her writing. It says, "For the sake of gaining all that I desired, 1,000 times I underwent the tortures of the realms of hell, achieving nothing for myself and others." So for the sake of gaining all that I desired, you know, in this constant loop of craving and aversion, wanting something, in this loop of craving and gaining all that I desired, 1,000 times I underwent the tortures of the realms of hell. And, you know, what he means here is that like craving and aversion is hell. So even in your, you know, let's say your supposed average everyday life, you're going to work, you're just trying to make it, you know, you're having friends, maybe family, you're just doing kind of the basics of what's expected of you at what's called the material world level or the basic relative reality world level. There's a real hell to that. And not just because it's hard to make a living and have a family and friends, but because we are constantly imagining something being better. The mind of hope and fear is hell, right? And I love this Buddhist term, the mind of hope and fear, and the possibility of a place beyond the mind of hope and fear. And that is, you know, if sadness is the basement emotion, hope and fear is the basement of suffering. It's just where we get caught up. So the tortures of the realms of hell, the mind of hope and fear, achieving nothing for myself and others. So we can go through a lifetime of just trying to get a little better off, right? Maybe this will happen, it'll be better. I hope that doesn't happen, it'll be worse. Mind of hope and fear. But nothing is like achieved, meaning, yes, we paid our rent and ate food, but we haven't done anything at the level of, you know, improving the well-being of others, improving this mind, this polluted mind that often we are inheritors of from our family and even past generations. So the next stanza is, "The present aches are nothing to compare with those, and yet great benefits may come from them. These troubles that dispel the pains of wanderers, how could I not rejoice in them?" So the present aches are nothing. For the sake of gaining all I desired, 1,000 times I underwent the tortures of the realms of hell, achieving nothing for myself and others. The present aches are nothing to compare with those, and yet great benefits may come from them. These troubles that dispel the pains of wanderers, how could I not rejoice in them? So there's a possibility, you know, that these present aches, you know, don't have to become these years of hell, and that the benefit I could actually experience by recognizing all of my daily fears and hopes as actually instructions or teachings. Like the great benefit, I could just use my life as a teaching. So Pema writes, I just have to read this, her commentary here. She said, when I read this, I'm reminded of an earlier part of my life when the suffering, in the suffering I went through around relationships, there was the pain of getting into them, and then even more pain getting out of them, and a tremendous amount of energy in between. I was like, nailed it. Likewise, our careers and other things we pursue can feel like the tortures of the realms of hell. And what do we have to show for it? Just the passage of time, stronger habits of striving, craving, hatred, and revenge. If we keep strengthening these old patterns, our present aches are nothing compared with that which will happen. And then she says about this idea of how can we, the troubles that I wish I wasn't happening, could I just rejoice in them? So she says, the pain we go through while changing our old habits, so recognizing these difficulties, it's not only worth tolerating, it's worth celebrating. So it is really hard, really, really hard to change our habits and patterns of how we think we will feel protected, safe, and okay. And kind of shifting, this point of view that's, I will be happy when this happens. I will be unhappy if that happens, to I'm okay no matter what. I'm deeply okay no matter what. Everything that comes is fuel for the fire of my awakening. Everything. It's hard. It's hard. And that's why we need to kind of rejoice in like the occasional instance when we're able to turn, the difficulties, the vulnerability of being a human. It's so vulnerable. We're so vulnerable. And to make that, instead of something we protect against, defend against, strive away from, we make that, how do we, when I got off my month-long retreat, the word that just kept coming up was tenderness. And like, how do I keep close to this just core tenderness, not defending over it, not pushing away from it? So I think, this idea that there's a kind of, sense that these difficulties that occur for us, can we turn that poison into medicine? It's an overarching theme there. And this opportunity that kind of old habits give us for change. And I wanted to spend, a moment here on this mind of open hope and fear, like the basement of our suffering, and thinking about some of the fears. It's not that they're, exaggerations. Some of them are very real and true right now or always. But this idea that we have the opportunity to cut through this time traveling. The mind of hope and fear is always traveling. It's going to the future. I hope this happens. I hope this happens. Going to the past. Oh, but that happened in the past. It was bad. And so like our defense against this momentum of the mind of hope and fear is like being right here, over and over and over, coming right back here. And unless we are acutely in danger in this moment, that's always going to be usually a greater refuge than those like realms of hell of our own mind, right? And so, yeah, I had a question for folks, and just curious, do you notice, like, what are the familiar hooks of the mind of hope and fear? What are the certain like areas where you're like, I just really get hooked there. I really hope this will happen. I really hope this won't happen. I see how it binds up all of my time and energy. Maybe not all, but more than I'd like. Any brave souls? Yes, Gladys. Yes, and Cage. Great.
For me, it's always hope to get out of the country. And fear is always, oh, it's not so good if I try to get myself out. I think the fundamental, I don't know, there is a seed that's really, really deep in between that I think there's some agitation of this in this time, in this space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? And it's there's totally sufficient reason to have those fears. And there's a sufficient reason to not live in them. Right. And so what helps, Gladys, for you?
Meditate in a refuge.
Yeah.
And I do less and less. I have a giant Google Doc to keep all my schemings on there. And it's, yeah, like it used to be very much in detail. Now I'm like, actually, it's not that bad. I can find a lot of joy just stay on this land. And there are a lot of, like every day I'm uncovering new things. It's really the manifestation of my inner state on how I see the world.
Yes.
Yeah, but the homesickness is very, very strong. I think it kind of becomes my drive for other projects, my creative work.
Yeah.
It's so strong to a point, it's actually becomes good because the outlet right now is very good.
It's so beautiful. And yeah, if I don't know if folks heard that on this side of the room, but this idea that, the longing to be able to go home and visit and be with people, which is so authentic and beautiful and true. It's not that we deny it, but that you're finding these outlets that allow it to have a wholesome manifestation, right? Because, there are so many obstacles for our heart to know its true belonging and to feel connected, and there can be so many difficulties along the way. So how do we work with them? And meditation, of course, and then these other outlets that might uniquely fit us. So thank you. Yeah. Cage.
Yeah, I'm behind over here. I think mine both are wrapped up in my family.
Yep.
Yeah, they are really the ones who grip me the quickest and the most solid. And it's both ways, me hoping that they're healthy and their outcomes are good and they're going to live a very, very long time. And then also, the fear of something going really wrong.
Yeah.
And the fear of that huge loss.
Yeah.
I think are and that will trip me into sadness or a lot of joy. If I'm, and I always notice it in the meditation too, like I noticed the difference in thoughts. There were some wispy ones that were like barely formed, and then some, like a big one that really I had to like, it came like fully formed.
Yeah.
With like lighting and the people were there and the whole scene was set. And that one really, and it was really around my family, and it was just, they were all very real, and the whole thing was, but it was good, like I was saying earlier, that noting the emptiness did come, and you could kind of write it out. But yeah, so I think just fear for my loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it's so beautiful. You love your family, right? And then the Shepa is letting that, override everything that's in the present. And that's where we can get stuck. And so it's so helpful to see it and also see the wholesomeness of it and not let it fully take over. Yeah.
And my friends too.
And
Just a conglomerate of my loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, it's tricky, this mind of hope and fear often is associated with kind of like the 8 worldly gains. And, I want to be impressive and important. I don't want to be people thinking I'm wrong. I want to have a lot of, status, and I don't want to be blamed for things. Like all these different ways that we're kind of hoping to find refuge outside of ourselves. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have a good living, and it's very hard to make a living here in the city, right? To be taken care of and supported. But it's when we like hang all of our hopes of well-being, satisfaction and worth. And it's very tricky because, the value system that most of us have been raised under of capitalism really puts our worth with productivity and outcomes. And it's really very much going against the grain, which was also true in the time of the Buddha. Like, no one thought Buddha was cool before he was enlightened. He's like, you run away to wear rags and starve yourself in the woods? Like, not the look, that. That's, it wasn't capitalism, it was feudalism, like kingdoms. It's just same hierarchical approach. And the Buddha saw right through it. That will not ease suffering. Even having, he had many, what I think were called pleasure palaces. He had his winter palace, his summer palace, all these gardens, every need, imagine every need. He had all his own singing birds, like everything you could imagine, not happy. And that's that kind of truism we sometimes tell ourselves in order to feel better about not having what we want, of nobody's happy, even those rich people aren't happy. But it's true, right? Or if they're happy, it's not because they're rich. So being able to see through that mind of hope and fear based in the material world, that's really important to helping us dedicate to that which will sustain our happiness and well-being. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Marta, Ron.
Hi, so good to be back. So for me, it's this delusional idea of perfectionism that is always around, and it's perfectionism in the way I do things, work, relationships, the way my house looks, infinite cleaning and all the things. And very much aware it's impossible.
Your husband's laughing next to you, which is great.
My husband, it's true. And it's I'm very much aware that it's impossible to keep up with because it's absolutely delusional. And so there's always been this idea, once I'm enlightened, finally things will be perfect. So it's been this chasing the enlightenment so that things can be perfect. And I'm very aware even that is delusional, and kind of have learned to celebrate all the imperfections. When I did art, my projects were all about exploring impermanence and imperfections, and kind of bringing balance to this insanity. And I find it really fascinating the Shanti Deva story, that he was so lousy and yet he could just poof and that's very inspiring to me.
And the moral of the story is, be lazy, get enlightened.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Marta. And I really, I think that perfectionist tendency, I don't know. I would love to know cross-culturally, how much of that is distributed globally. There's a lot of perfectionism here in North America, right? Especially in certain professions. And I think there's just this, this hope that, underneath it, no surprise, desire to control. Right? That's what a lot of our compensatory strategies against feeling sad and afraid. If I could just control this, it'd be okay. If I control you, if you would just act this way, I would be happy. And so it's so humbling and beautiful, and it's wonderful to have laughter with this hopeless project, right? Of trying to make things perfect, trying to control things. We can't. And there's and that's, I think, Shanti Deva in his dramatic way, get out of these realms of hell, of building your home on the changing sands, right? On recognizing the impermanence and futility of thinking everything will be okay if I get this next thing or avoid that next thing. So Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And what you read today was spot on for this processing this insanity. And could you share what page that it's on?
Yes, we're on 198.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there time?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, impermanence. So the fear right now is around my living situation, you know, which may be impermanent, but what's worse is that I don't know. Right? So my landlord has been the greatest landlord I've ever had. And at 98 years old, he just passed. You know. And so now my landlord is his 5 kids, who I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know what their plans are, and I can't even ask
Yeah.
at this moment.
Yeah.
So there's some time where things are going to be very uncertain. And I love where I'm at, and I have plans to do improvements, and you know, and so that's the fear, is that I'll lose this place. But, you know, I have a lot of trust in, you know, it's always worked out.
Yeah.
And it's actually always been an improvement. And so, yeah, I'd like to have pleasure palaces.
Multiple.
Multiple pleasure palaces. But so there's that, but so that's the hope thing, and the clinging thing is that knowledge that, you know, my life has been consistently going in a very beautiful direction, and I could end up in something wonderful afterwards. The options are endless.
Yeah.
So I lose this and anything can open up.
Yeah.
And that is a ripe area for a lot of fantasy and wandering
Yeah.
in my mind. Right, and
Yeah.
that's how hope is pulling at me.
Yeah.
So the fear is losing my place, and the hope is what comes next.
Yeah.
And I could spend
Perfect example.
a
Yeah.
lot of time, you know, just playing with that
Mm-hmm.
idea.
Yeah, wonderful. You're sitting in such a good place for practice, right? And to see it, and also, you know, the allure of fantasy, and, you know, hope has quite a lot of benefit. You know, the way that hope and fear is described in this Buddhist context here doesn't fully encompass it. And, you know, I'm sure some of you know this Rebecca Solnit quote on hope, which is, hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. It is an axe that you break down the doors with in an emergency. So hope is not a lottery ticket that you can sit on the couch and clutch feeling lucky. It's an axe you break down the doors with in an emergency. So this idea of, like, you know, how can we have hope be this active stance that actually embodies free will and agency and potential and possibility, not just a reaction to fear. You know, so it's really beautiful. And I think that, you know, the practice of patience gives rise to this possibility, actually, of hope, right? And hope that we can become different, we can change. Like, I really 100% believe that we can change. You can't change someone, it's very different. But I believe that we can change, anyone can change. And that kind of hope is like such a good and wholesome hope for us. And actually, it might be an axe that you break down the door with, right? Sometimes changing ourselves is a radical act. Radical act, you know, cutting through the delusion of each thought, each fantasy. I thought it was going to be like this. It should have been like that. Why isn't it like this? You know, and letting, instead having hope be this, I will wake up for the sake of all beings. You know, and I think you said, Ron, like trust. You know, in this relationship between trust and faith and devotion, it's all this like approach to life that's very generous. Like, I am here with life, with what life is offering me. And not like, and I know it's going to work out great, but just like, I'm here with it. It's a really beautiful stance. It feels like hope to me. And fear, oh gosh, yeah, I just want to share one thing. It's interesting, like in the context of psychology, we talk a lot about fear in the context of, everyone maybe has heard of what Pavlov, I don't, if you've ever actually read about Pavlov, it's so sad. He was like, oh my God, it really harmed those doggies. Yeah. But this idea that we can associate something good, and salivate with something good, because there's a bell that's rung every time we get fed, and we just hear the bell and we salivate whether or not we get fed. And that we can learn these like habitual responses that are both positive in the salivating, but also that fear response. So, oh my God, I'm not going to enter a new relationship. I know what happens when I enter a new relationship. It's bad, right? We have this kind of conditioned response. And one thing, when you look at the science of how do we, the way it's called, it's not the best terminology, but it's called fear extinction, or how do we extinguish these habits or patterns of fear. And kind of most classically, when people have post-traumatic stress disorder, there's this exposure therapy in which you're developing a new response or a new inhibitory association. You're kind of like, instead of this thing I'm afraid of, whether it's swimming in the open water or being in a relationship, I'm going to practice being exposed to it enough that I'm going to reduce that fear response. But then the other thing I find so encouraging is when we feel anxious about something new, like a change in relationship or a change in housing or work, that we can, actually update and upgrade our fear by infusing it with that kind of wholesome hope that you're describing, that like trust, faith, devotion. And that's called, how do we reconsolidate our memories to be, instead of with that hot, tight, contracted feeling of fear, like continue rethinking about it, like holding something in your hand over and over, but not with the ruminative contraction with, it could be different, So there's a really subtle thing here of, we can have the fear with the Shepa of like, oh God, it's gonna go wrong, and I hope it doesn't go wrong. And then we can also hold the fear kind of close to us in this way, where we feel the possibility of things being different. And just such a cool, spectrum of what we can experience in the way that we learn, the way that we respond to the world, and all of its many myriad ongoing triggers and opportunities. So, with that, let's dedicate the merit of our practice here together. So taking a moment, coming back to the breath and the body. Feel or imagine this breath brings you into this beautiful sacred refuge of the body. Maybe the body could be your own pleasure temple, pleasure palace, just a place of such nourishment, well-being, and protection. And taking a moment to consider the energies that we have gathered here together as a group, each one of us. And we symbolically offer our time here together as an act of the Bodhisattva, the compassion warrior. We offer any of these good energies or the merit of our time. We offer it up. And so placing hands together in front of the heart, if that feels comfortable and natural, and dedicating this practice and the energies of this practice, that all beings could know peace and ease. All beings could feel healthy and strong. All beings could not hear cars backing up as they dedicated their merit. that all beings would find compassion for each and everything that arose, that all beings could feel love and belonging. Thank you, everyone.